The Tudor Queen Elizabeth I has been stated as being one of the greatest to ever rule over England. She was a queen that her father Henry VIII would have been greatly proud of, and she dealt with a huge number of obstacles during her life. She managed to defeat the Spanish Armada, the biggest military threat to her reign. Then she even ordered the execution of her biggest domestic threat, Mary Queen of Scots. Mary was Elizabeth's Catholic cousin, and many Catholics across the country wanted her to be queen over Elizabeth. But Mary would lose her head inside the walls of Fotheringhay Castle for being part of the plots that planned Elizabeth's death and downfall. But in her final months, Elizabeth I became very sick, and the once strong and dominant monarch was a shadow of her former self. Her final days were spent in depression and in pain, and after her death there was a death mask cast of her face, showing the Queen's look as she passed away. But what is the story of the death mask of Elizabeth I? To support our channel, please make sure to subscribe. Elizabeth I reigned as the Queen of England for almost 45 years, and she was the final Tudor queen, as she did not have any children or heir. With her the Tudor reign died out, and it was a period which was a golden age, with a huge birth of theatre, with writers such as Shakespeare showcasing his talents, with his works being performed in theatres around London. But in her final years, Elizabeth was not very well at all, and over time she got more ill and deteriorated. Her close friends also got sick themselves, and people she had known for decades and most of her life passed away, which had a huge impact on her. Her closest ladies that had been with her for some time were slowly dwindling in their numbers as they got old and died. In 1590, Blanche Parry, one of Elizabeth's closest, died, and she had known Elizabeth since she was a princess, and Blanche was the chief gentlewoman of the Privy Chamber and also the keeper of the Queen's jewels. Such a trusted woman, Blanche's death caused a huge degree of upset. Then 8 years later, William Cecil, her close advisor, died. Cecil had been a strong ally of Elizabeth for years, and she lost one of her most trustworthy friends and companions, but with this she began to retire from court life, and she became more isolated and alone. She drifted from the court she once presided over with confidence, but she still remained as ruthless as ever, as she would order the execution of her one-time favourite Robert Devereux, the Earl of Essex. He had been accused of trying to plan a rebellion, which would have kidnapped the Queen, but with this he went to his execution on Tower Hill. As the year 1603 came around, the Queen was not a very well lady. She had fallen into a deep depression, and she then travelled to one of her favourite residences, Richmond Palace. She loved this palace, and she saw it as a good place to retire to in her final years. But she was still attended on by her loyal ladies, but in January 1603 she refused to eat and drink, and lost a significant amount of weight, and because of this many people became worried about her. She became indignant, and the doctors came to visit her, but they were not allowed entry to the Queen. Catherine Howard, the Countess of Nottingham, another one of her close friends, had also died, and she served the Queen for around 45 years, and this then pushed the Queen over the edge. It was said that the Queen loved the Countess well, and hath much lamented her death, remaining ever since in a deep melancholy that she must seemingly be overtaken. Elizabeth at the time was very frail and was almost 70 years old, which was a significant age for a woman of the Tudor period. However, until her final moments she was the boss and was in charge. She continued to refuse to eat, and she would have periods of contemplation, where she stood for long periods of time. She became very guilty for the executions that she had ordered, and in particular was plagued by the execution of Mary Queen of Scots. And it was said, she shed many tears and sighs, manifesting her innocence, that she never gave consent to the death of that Queen. It's possible she believed that Mary's execution would prevent her going to heaven in death, and she must have worried about this. But her mind and health was failing, and she then made the decision to retire to bed for good. The Archbishop of Canterbury was summoned to come to her side and to pray for her soul, and he informed Elizabeth that she would be a queen in heaven, and not just on earth, saying she had lived a very great life. But on the 24th of March 1603, Elizabeth I died, and her remains were then taken from Richmond Palace to Whitehall, where they were watched by attendants for 3 weeks. Elizabeth had stated specifically that following her death she did not want to be embalmed, but this was not adhered to, and these wishes were ignored. But at some point a death mask of Elizabeth was cast, and was taken of the final Tudor monarch. questions in England persisted about the new king and how the King of Scotland would also govern and rule England, a larger kingdom. But the mould of Elizabeth's face was taken and was cast, and it shows the aged queen looking different to the portraits that were taken of her during her life. Elizabeth in portraits would hide behind the mask of youth, but her death mask was true, and it showed the elderly queen for who she was. She had a pensive countenance, and the effigy which was later made of her had a ruff and jewels added to it. It was common for kings and queens to have death masks taken, as these were used in making effigies for their tombs, but they were also a reminder of the person who had died. Elizabeth was old in her death mask, and this would have been the truest image of her, which would have been made for many years. She was later buried in a huge ornate vault in Westminster Abbey, which is marked by a tomb that shows Elizabeth I in her grandeur and opulence, and this was made using her death mask, it was said. The Queen has a crown and headdress on her head, showing also her wealth. It isn't known for certain what killed Elizabeth I, as many historians have debated causes from lead poisoning to heart failure. Some claim that the lead makeup she wore heavily throughout her life had a huge detrimental effect on her health, and others have stated that the Tudor Queen had cancer or some sort of infection that caused her to grow weaker and contract pneumonia. But following her death it would have been the best doctors and physicians that embalmed her, and also doctors who were the ones who made the death mask, after they made her look more comfortable and relaxed. But Elizabeth I is today buried in a huge and ornate tomb inside Westminster Abbey. To begin with, she was buried in a vault with her grandfather, the father of the Tudor dynasty, Henry VII. But she was then moved as James I, her successor, was placed inside there, and he would order the huge tomb to be made for Elizabeth, showing her importance. She was buried with her half-sister Mary, but there is little to commemorate Mary, who was also a Tudor monarch, showing how much more significant Elizabeth I was during her reign. But her death mask is a poignant reminder of the Queen who changed the face of English history forever and had a huge impact on English society. Thanks for watching. To support our channel, please make sure to subscribe, and once again, thank you so much for watching.